On May 26, 1828, in the city of Nuremberg, Germany, a teenage boy stumbles into town square. He's dressed in rough, ill-fitting clothes. He walks strangely, as if his legs don't quite know how to carry him. His boots are too tight. He acts like he had never worn shoes before today. He's holding a letter with one request, but it wouldn't be long before people start trying to kill him. Welcome back to Legends May Live, where we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the downright eerie. I'm Drew, and today we're stepping into the shadows of the 19th century Germany to unravel the life of a boy with no past and a death shrouded in secrets. This is the story of Kaspar Hauser. When Kaspar Hauser first wandered into town, clumsily walking in his misfitted clothes, he stumbled about until he wandered up on a local shoemaker, George Wakeman. As George tried to ask Kaspar, who looked to be around 15 or 16 years old, if he needed any help, Kaspar just looked dazed and confused. And all he said was, "I want to be a cavalryman, like my father." He said this as he handed a sealed letter to George. George could tell that this kid needed more help than he could provide, so he just took the envelope in his hands and guided the boy to the closest police station. When he arrived, George told the officers everything he knew, handed them the letter, and just left Kaspar with them, sure that they would get all of it sorted out fast enough. Authorities took the boy and the letter, and they were expecting this to be just a simple case of a teenager running away from home, or maybe a beggar. But Kaspar Hauser, he didn't fit anything they knew. They agreed that he seemed to be around 16 years old, but he behaved more like a 6-year-old. He didn't understand the most basic concepts. Fire frightened him, and he had no idea what money was. And when one officer got the idea to offer him a toy horse, his face just lit up with pure excitement. It was also apparent he had no education, because since he could only say, "I want to be a cavalryman like my father," the police tried giving him pen and paper, and they wanted to see if he could write out a message, but they quickly learned that he couldn't read or write. But this didn't mean that there were no clues as to Kaspar's life. After all, he had brought a letter which he initially handed to George, and it would turn out he had a second letter in his pocket. When authorities opened the first letter, it was just really bizarre. It had this awkward phrasing and no signature. The letter said, "The child is named Kaspar. I ask you to take him in. I bring him to you because I must go away and cannot take care of him any longer. He was given to me on October 7th, 1812, as a baby. I have taught him reading and writing, and I have taught him the Christian religion. He has never left the house. No one has ever seen him. Now he wishes to be a cavalryman like his father was. Please take him to the 6th Cavalry Regiment, or hang him if he does not want to be a soldier." The second letter was no less strange. It was supposedly from his mother, and it read, "This child was baptized and is called Kaspar. His father was one of the light cavalry. He was killed. I am a poor girl and cannot take care of him. Please take care of him." Both letters were written in the same handwriting, and both just had this matter-of-fact, no real emotion way of putting things. So while police worked out what to do next, Kaspar was sent for a medical exam. Doctors found that he was in good health, but his muscles were underdeveloped. What they found was consistent with confinement. They were able to get him to write his name, Kaspar Hauser, but aside from that, it seemed he couldn't read or write at all. From May to early July 1828, Kaspar was placed in the care of local jailer. Kaspar was given food, books, and time, and before long he began speaking and seemed to understand social interactions a little bit better. And once authorities were confident that he wasn't a threat, he was moved to the care of Friedrich Dahmer. He was a schoolmaster and philosopher. Friedrich began teaching him, and within weeks he was forming full sentences. Within months he was reading, writing, and drawing elaborate sketches. And then he began to not just speak, but talk, like have conversations rather than just identify an object or a need. And he started describing vivid dreams, and he had moments of deep insight and a really sharp memory. Too sharp, some say. He claimed that he had been kept for as long as he could remember in a small dark cell. He didn't know where it was, just that he slept on straw. He drank water and ate bread. He said that a man who he never saw would come in when he was asleep, and every now and then the man would leave a book or a toy or just move the water bucket. He said that he never saw daylight, that he couldn't stand or walk in his confinement, and that his entire world was that room. And then one day he just woke up somewhere different, dressed in new clothes, taught to write his name, told what to say, and then released into the world. The question was no longer, who is Kaspar Hauser? It was, why was he hidden away for 16 years? Some took him at his word and believed his story. Others didn't buy a word of it. But whatever the truth was, it was only the start. Because if someone went to all the trouble to erase Kaspar Hauser's past, what would they do to protect that secret? Kaspar Hauser's story, if it was real, was unlike anything the public had ever heard. He described his life in that cell with chilling detail. It was no larger than a closet. He was kept in darkness with no windows, never a visitor, and he never heard voices of any nearby conversations. He said he would just wake up to find bread and water beside him, that someone, a man with gloved hands, would come while he was drugged or asleep. He was never spoken to, never touched, and his only companions were a few wooden toys, a small horse, a crude puzzle, and a book with scribbles. For his whole life, that was his world. Until one day, the man gave him new clothes, taught him to walk, drilled him on a few sentences, and then abandoned him in Nuremberg. To some, this was the stuff of nightmares, a child locked away to erase his identity. But others were thinking that this was just too absurd to be real. They said it had to be made up. They pointed out inconsistencies in Kaspar's story, like how could he remember so many details from a life he supposedly spent in total darkness? And more importantly, why was he able to learn to read and write so quickly? And if he had never seen the man prior to his release, why did the letters claim that he had been taught to read and write? Still, the public fascination only grew, and so did the rumors. One theory began to take hold, a theory that would elevate Kaspar from a sad orphan to the center of a royal conspiracy. Some believed he was the rightful heir to the Grand Duchy of Baden, a German state. They thought that his noble birth threatened someone's power, and so he had to be hidden away. It did make a strange kind of sense. In 1812, a prince of Baden was born, but died shortly after, according to official records anyway. But what if that child didn't die? What if he was smuggled out and held in secret to protect the throne and erase a bloodline? Kaspar's sudden appearance, the strange letters, his gentle manners, quick mind, and uncanny transformation. Was it coincidence, or was it evidence? Authorities quietly began investigating, and noble families refused to answer questions. But soon, things started to go wrong. For a time, Kaspar Hauser seemed to be settling into his strange new life pretty well. Friedrich Dahmer, Kaspar's caretaker, believed his story completely. Under Dahmer's guidance, Kaspar learned astronomy, philosophy, and multiple languages. He developed a taste for art and played the piano. But there were problems. Kaspar was emotional and pretty volatile. He would fly into rages without warning. He told elaborate stories about dreams and visions, and sometimes he would appear almost possessed. Still, in spite of all this, overall he really was a well-behaved young man who at least appeared to genuinely care about those around him, so Friedrich just took his outbursts as one more thing to work through as Kaspar adjusted to life outside of that dark room. But still, the mystery of his origin kept him in the public eye. Nobles from all over came to visit the so-called Child of Europe. But on October 1829, things took a dark turn. As Friedrich was looking for Kaspar to begin their lessons for the day, he went through every room calling out his name. And finally he got to the cellar, where Friedrich sees Kaspar just lying there on the floor with blood soaking his hair and pooled around his head. He rushes over and scoops up Kaspar, who at this point is starting to come to. The gash is deep and bleeding, but Friedrich is able to bandage him up and get him to medical attention in time to save his life. But as soon as he's able, Kaspar tells them that a hooded man broke into the house and attacked him with a razor, whispering, "You must die before you tell the world who you are." Immediately, people feel like there's just something off with the story, and the knife is never found. There weren't any signs of forced entry either, but the biggest problem is that Kaspar's story changes slightly with each retelling. So, a lot of people started to wonder, did someone really attack him, or did he do it to himself? But this wasn't the end of the injuries. In 1830, he's shot in the head. Now, it's a minor wound. He says it was an accident, just a discharge of a dropped gun. It only grazed him, but some wonder if it was staged to kind of keep him in the spotlight. Every incident pushes more people away. Even Dahmer, once his greatest supporter, starts to think that maybe Kaspar's not what he seems. So Kaspar's sent to live in a home with a new caretaker, and then another, and each time things fall apart. There's just erratic behavior, grand stories, accusations, threats, and still no answers. Some become convinced he's a fraud. That his story was just this odd invention, a long con fueled by this longing and need for attention and pity. But others argue that his trauma explains everything. The erratic behavior, the contradictions, the flare-ups. I mean, after all, if he had really been imprisoned in darkness for most of his life in a space no bigger than a closet, could he ever be normal? So the lines just kept blurring. Was he a victim? Was he a liar? Or a pawn in something far more dangerous than anyone realized? In December of 1833, the question would come to a bloody end. On December 14th, 1833, Kaspar Hauser left home without explanation. He was going to meet a man in Ansbach, but just a few hours later, he returns home, stumbling, pale, and bleeding. There's a deep stab wound in his chest, just below the heart. He gasps for help. He's barely able to speak, but his caretaker rushes to his side. And through ragged breaths, Kaspar tells him that a stranger lured him into the gardens of Ansbach Court. The stranger had said that he had information about Kaspar's true identity. When Kaspar arrived, the man handed him a small bag and then stabbed him. He collapses on the floor. His caretaker scoops him up and carries him over to the bed. They immediately rush to get the doctor, but it doesn't look good. For 3 days, Kaspar clings to life. He's feverish, and in and out of consciousness. Then finally, on December 17th, 1833, he took his last breath and passed away. But before he passes, he gives them the bag. Inside is a folded scrap of paper. It's a note written in a strange code. Mirror writing, reversed characters, and fractured phrases. When it's decoded, the paper says, "Hauser will be able to tell you quite precisely how I look and from where I am. To save Hauser the effort, I want to tell you myself where I come from. I come from the Bavarian border, on the river. My name is MLO." And that was it. No real name, no motive, just this cryptic message. Of course, the case exploded again. Was it a murder? A suicide? A hoax gone too far? The official investigation concluded that he had stabbed himself, perhaps accidentally, while fabricating another attack. But his supporters, including several nobles, believed it was a targeted killing, to silence him for good. Kaspar was buried in Ansbach. His headstone reads, "Here lies Kaspar Hauser, a riddle of his time. His birth was unknown, his death mysterious." He left behind no answers, no confirmed identity, no family, just questions. So was he a royal heir? Maybe a con man? Or perhaps just a lost soul trying to make sense of a shattered life? In the years since his death, investigators have continued to chase the truth. In 1996, and again in 2002, DNA tests were run on blood and hair samples believed to be Kaspar's. They compared them to the Royal House of Baden, and the results? Inconclusive. Not enough material, too many unknowns, and the records not reliable. Historians remain divided. Was he mentally ill or part of a dark cover-up? Kaspar Hauser appeared out of nowhere. He claimed his childhood had been stolen, that he lived in a box of shadows, fed through a hole, trained to be silent, erased. And maybe that's exactly what happened. Or maybe that's the story he wanted us to believe. In the end, the boy with no past left behind a legacy of whispers, wonders, and a warning. A human mystery, a walking contradiction. A legend that may never die. That's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed today's story, please remember to like, subscribe, and send it to a friend who loves a strange tale. Until next time, try not to start any rumors that you may be a lost prince. And keep a lookout, because legends may live.